Hey folks, welcome to Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres, and I forgot all my stakes at home, and I'm joined by...
I'm Thea, and if this episode doesn't go well, the world will literally end.
What's our topic, Thea?
Our topic is, are we even able to play D&D with low stakes anymore?
Can we? Can
Can
we
we?
do it?
Are we capable of?
Is it a thing? Can I do it? Where can I do it?
Yes.
How?
Yeah, so
And
this is something
that's in the title.
Yeah. Let's find out.
Let's find out.
The title was not over. What we do, this is all in the title, is in the title.
It's in the title, yeah.
Yeah.
Adds a lot of clarity.
The episode. There, I will finish. Ceres, this is something that you have brought up sometimes. You have complained to me a lot. So I decided, let's make an episode out of it so you stop complaining.
Yes. Should I summarize my complaints?
Do it after the intro, the
All
episode.
Right, sounds good.
End of the title.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
So D&D draws its inspiration from a lot of fantasy, and a lot of that fantasy was like epic, long-form narrative, like Lord of the Rings, but a lot of it was also pulpy adventures of anti-heroes, of like lone wandering heroes who were not on some particular quest, and a lot of that was easier to pull off in the beginning. And so old school D&D was composed of a series of modules, literally modular adventures that took place in a loosely coherent world. And each module's rewards was loot and XP, which were the driving motivations for the players, not any moral connotation. It was just like, you do this, you get money and XP, which each character used to level up and pursue their own goals.
Which is exemplified by the fact that money used to be XP.
Yeah,
it used to be that
that's fascinating.
There was no experience points. Collecting gold is what leveled you up.
Yeah, there you go. And pursuing their own goals in downtime sessions, that's where you got to express your character's goals and ambitions. And this structure helped to keep the adventures shorter and lower stakes. Not saying that they were all lower stakes or they were all short, but generally this format helps with that. And now, Ceres, you can tell us about how this changed and what the problem is, for us at least.
Okay, so here is my problem in a nutshell. I have noticed that when you play D&D, there is a tendency for the same pattern to repeat itself, which is that you start a campaign and the campaign has very dark themes and is like Game of Thrones-esque. It's like super depressing, super violent, super grim, babies dying left and right. The stakes are incredibly high. The fate of the cosmos hangs in the balance. Every time you make a false choice, innocent people die by the hands of unscrupulous barons or slavering gnolls. And it's depressing and it's monotonous at some point. And can we do a form of storytelling that is better? In my experience, part of this, at least, is like the new DM experience, where you're like, I'm a new DM. I want to make sure my party cares about this. I'm scared they're not going to like my setting or like what's going on. So I crank up the stakes to 11. I make it all super grim and dark and gritty to show how mature and cool and adult I am. And I put them through this horror show. And not that can't make a good campaign, but then you watch movies like Top Gun, where the stakes are like literally the ego of the main characters. And if you haven't seen Top Gun, it's about ace fighter pilots training to fly jets. And there's a competition between the main character, Maverick, and the main antagonist, Iceman, who will get the number one position on the leaderboard of the Academy. And that is the entire conflict of the movie. And that is the entire stakes of the movie, is basically Maverick's feelings will be hurt if he does not get number one. And you watch a movie like that, and I think it is a good movie, and you think to yourself, wow, why can't I tell D&D stories that feel like this?
Yeah, there you go. And I think that I have here, as always, 3 points that I want to bring to this conversation. The first one is quite simple: designing with those stakes in mind. So designing the campaign kind of from the start with those stakes in mind. And hey, first sub-bullet point is personal stakes, which you just brought up in a very with a great, maybe the best example. That maybe characters don't care because if they don't succeed, everyone will suffer forever. Maybe they care because their dad's in prison.
Yeah.
Or maybe they care because that's their character goal. Maybe their goal is that they want to be the best at something.
Yeah, I want to be the best, the very best, like no one ever was. And if I fail, nothing happens except for that I am disappointed that I didn't get to be the very best, like no one ever was, right? Super high stakes scenarios where like do engage with my narrative or the world will end can have an alienating effect where it kind of doesn't matter who you are as a character or what you like or what your character's all about. You probably agree on the lowest common denominator. Gee, it would be nice if reality existed at the end of this adventure still. And so, or gee, it would be nice if we didn't enter 1,000 years of nightmarish terror and dictatorship or something like that, right?
It's
Gee, it
very
would be
Zack
nice.
Snyder. What if there was an empire that was awful to its people all the time, and it was like sexually abusing them? That would be bad.
Yeah, should we resist
We
it?
shouldn't
Maybe
put
we
up with
should.
that.
Let's find
We
out.
shouldn't put.
Yeah, so exactly, right? Like super high stakes like that can have an alienating effect where what your character believes or thinks doesn't really matter because the only thing about your character that the narrative appeals to is the most common denominator that your character would probably like it if the universe still existed when they were done. And it can have a little bit of a railroady effect because if the party is really interested in setting up an adventuring academy in Thimbleport, but if they take a session off to try and do that, the oceans will boil and the gods will come out of the sky and eat all the souls of the people on the planet, then they can't do that, right? They can't spend time focused on what they want to do. They can only focus on your plot, which this is why I mentioned as like a new DM problem. I think sometimes that's the point, is that the DM doesn't want the player getting up into any shenanigans other than focusing solely on the plot that they have prepared. But that turns it into more of a serialized novel and less of a collaborative game where the decisions and motivations of the individual characters matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of kind of like new DMs and like the scope of the game and like always it being about the end of the world, capping level, it's allowed and encouraged by the Dungeon Master's Guide. Do you know that?
I did not know that, but I agree with that. I think you should think about your campaigns ending by about 12th level because data shows that most campaigns don't go beyond that level, and that's about the level where the rules still stay sane and reasonable. There's a
It
reason
doesn't even
Baldur's
have
Gate
to.
only
It
went to
doesn't even
12.
have to go all that way up. I have actually like researching on the topic a little bit. I've actually found that like 5th level is a popular cap level for people to be like, there, you have reached the maximum level of like being somehow heroic and awesome in the world. You're strong enough to fight some cool monsters and to have a real impact of the world. And from now on, all the rewards will be like materials or like maybe a boon.
Yeah.
Like you get an extra spell slot or something. But we're not doing the whole game progression from now.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I haven't heard that so much, but that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like I think you should what I was trying to say earlier is I think you should consider 12 your absolute upper limit just from the
Hmm.
get go. You shouldn't plan any campaigns that go to 20, in my opinion. The game kind of breaks down and it gets worse. But if you want to go even lower than that, right? Um, it's allowed, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're, and also if you're like a new DM reading the 2014 DMG and you see how it starts with the section on gods and cosmology, don't let that manipulate you, so to speak, into writing a
Hmm.
story that's all about the gods and cosmology. Because that's, I think, also where this comes from, right?
Hmm.
Is that people are like, well, you're creating a setting. First things first, why does the setting exist? Okay, I guess a god created it. All right, so now
Hmm.
we've started the DM with thinking about the gods and thinking about these cosmic level stakes, rather than being like, why don't we start in, Shireton? Why don't we start in Hobbiton, where the stakes are will the pumpkins grow, and will you embarrass yourself in front of your neighbors, right? And then you can grow the narrative from there. If you already
Yeah.
start thinking of the world in like such a cosmic way the first time you think about it, I think it puts you
Mhm.
on track to incorporate cosmic stakes.
Yeah. Speaking of gods, my final point is on the topic of gods and super powerful beings.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about the early D&D,
Mm-hmm.
and I was thinking like, how did they do 20th level? And like, I don't, they didn't go
They
down
didn't.
a whole rabbit hole. Well, but there was like Vecna Rising or something, like,
Yeah, well, like
uh,
one of the things to point out is in the original D&D rules, they didn't have high level play incorporated into it. Leveling up until 20th level is something that came over time and eventually became the expected standard of D&D. But I know that there was at least one module in which the fighter only went up to 9th level. And that was it. That was the end of the fighter table. And of course, in its sort of weird early D&D way, I think it was that like different tables went up to different levels. So um, I think like some classes leveled up more often, but had less impactful levels, and other classes leveled up less often and had more impactful levels. At least in theory. Um, but like this idea that all campaigns go to 20th level wasn't baked into the game or originally. So.
yeah, yes, absolutely. But also, I have the feeling, and this is my
Hmm.
feeling, that
Hmm.
like even 20th level adventures were like,
Hmm.
we need to fight this lich.
Hmm.
But like if this lich rises, the lich does not automatically conquer the world.
Hmm.
Like there's other obstacles in its way. Somebody else will probably like stop them if we fail. It's
Hmm.
just that if we fail, then they do less damage, and also we get the gold, we get the loot, we get the XP.
Hmm.
And I brought it up in the topic world of on the topic of like gods, because in a world with like gods, even 20th level characters can be outclassed cosmically always.
Hmm.
Like you can still say that you're still allowed to have your 20th level characters not be strong enough to counter a god. And like banning Wish is not a very controversial take, I think.
Hmm.
And like once you ban Wish, 20th level characters are really not these like whole reality warpers that we sometimes think of them as. Like a 20th level wizard is going to like being able to go on a dimension hopping adventure. But if you say but like we can they can still face giant monsters who want to eat them without the giant monster otherwise being able to eat the earth, because if the giant monster wants to eat the earth, then the god of good righteousness will send someone to smite that thing, like an angel that is a lot more powerful than you will show up and do it. Like even a 20th level party can be challenged with something that will not automatically destroy the world if the 20th level party fails, right?
I mean, I kind of, I slightly disagree, and then I'm on the other hand confused. So the part I slightly disagree on, I think 20th level parties without Wish are still incredibly strong. I can remember working up a loop where you basically create backup bodies for yourself, so that every time you die, you get reincarnated into your clone in a demi plane. and I was doing this. I was like seeing if you could do this as a wizard, and this was in 5e D&D, and you didn't need wish to do it. You just cast demiplane, and then you fill it with wards and sigils and glyphs of warding and everything, and then you have these clone bodies in there, and you just generate one after the another, after the other, after the
Yeah,
other,
okay,
and then
but I mean
basically you can't be
that's
murdered,
awesome.
right?
Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and that is super powerful by
Yeah.
by the standards of like a player character. Like
Hmm.
that's really really cool. But like I'm saying, there is like the gap between the world is going to end
Hmm.
and a challenge for a 20th level character. Like the
Hmm.
delta between those two
Hmm.
is as big as you want to make it as the DM.
Hmm.
Like you can
Like
just
the point that
decide.
you're like, if I understand you correctly, the point that you're making is that even at high level play, the stakes don't have to be that the world ends, because the gods and cosmic forces can be arbitrarily more powerful than
Exactly. As the
the
dungeon
20th
master, you
level
still
characters,
control everything.
provided certain features are not available.
Yeah, basically, like you, like the party is still is only as powerful in the power scaling of your world as you want them to be.
Hmm.
And that's not something that we don't really talk about a lot. But like you can still power scale your world as the dungeon master as you want.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is at some point you have to start bending the rules, right? Like, you have to come up with monsters with lots of legendary resistances, and like, you're not going to find a generic kobold stat block that can challenge a 20th level party. Instead, you'll find a lot of legendary creatures with specific lore behind them, and you kind of need to retrofit everything. So, I mean, it's something that you can do, but I would argue that since the game at 20th level is not particularly more fun than it is at 12th level, in my humble opinion, I wouldn't go through all that work. I would
Yeah,
just say you
that's
don't level
true.
up beyond 12.
Sure. I mean, but we already talked about all of those things. But I'm just thinking, like, if you wanted to play at 20th level, does it automatically mean that the world has to be in danger? Does the fabric of the universe have to be in danger? And it's like that's a common trope. But no, it doesn't have. You as the DM still have control. And like if you design with those stakes in mind, which means yes, designing monsters, designing your enemies, that they're not all like planet eaters and
Mm,
world conquerors.
yeah.
I think you can still have personal goals. Like I want to kill this one wizard who keeps planet hopping because he's a piece of shit and he killed my dad. And it's like, okay, we're fighting a 20th level wizard out of personal stakes.
Mm.
We can do that.
Yeah, I
There's
think the
just you
personal
need
stakes
to.
are like you have to there have to be stakes, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
you
true.
just need to figure out how to transition more of the stakes from things that affect everyone to things that affect individuals in the party, right?
Yeah,
Like, if your bakery ends, you will be very sad.
there you go. Yeah. So that was my point one, designing with those stakes in mind. My point two
Mm-hmm.
is that the head up your ass was mine
Mm-hmm.
all along.
Uh-huh.
Because
What does
you and
that
I
mean?
are pretentious world builders and storytellers, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
and I think that we won't settle sometimes for a lesser product, whatever that means in our heads, and so we expect a large return on the large investment of time and effort that we put into our worlds and our storylines.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe part of the problem is also that we psychologically, innately are driven to design high stakes in our world because we we feel very invested in this world and we don't want to tell small stories, we want to tell big stories. What do you think?
Yeah, I think like when you're working on something and you've invested a lot of
Oh, by the
time
way, for
into
the
it.
audience, the reference is the Head Up Your Ass with Thea is our bad movie series on auteurs who have their head up their ass.
Yes. Like M. Night Shyamalan when he made Orvator the Lost Orbordner.
Or Megaflopolis, am I right, fellas?
Am I right? More like Megalopolis? More like Megaflopolis. Like a movie flop. Yeah, so I think this is true. Like, I think this is something that can happen to you accidentally and something you need to keep an eye out for if you want to do more low stakes world building. You spend a lot of time on a world and you end up thinking to yourself subconsciously, I am spending so much time on this, therefore it must be important. And in order to justify that time and that importance, we make our story and our setting about really profound conflicts that we have big feelings about, that we really want to express, that sometimes lend us then to very high stakes. It's almost like, if the whole world isn't ending, why did I spend 8 hours preparing this session? Or to put it another way, did I really just spend 16 hours fleshing out the motivations of Boblin the Goblin the Baker? And the answer is, if that's what's fun for your table and for you, yeah. And you need to lose the attitude that only high stakes stories are valid and important if you want to be able to tell low stakes stories well, right? Um, so, like, it's just something to keep an eye out for, right? But it is true that the more time and effort you spend on your setting, the more you want your players to take it seriously, the more you want them to engage with it genuinely, the more you want them to compliment you on that. And so that leads you towards these very serious high stakes, which are hard to ignore, which align with, like, the great fantasy epics of our time are all about high stakes, right? And leads you to tell less small and personal stories, right? Because you're justifying it to yourself, you're justifying it to others, that you're spending all this
Yeah.
time on it. And also, lower stakes stories can sometimes, I mean, this is sometimes related, sometimes not related, but I also feel that sometimes you become less flexible the more of your world that you've prepared. The more time and effort you've spent on your world, the less that you want to make jokes or deviate from the sort of um, and make jokes about your world or undercut the seriousness of it, but also the less likely you are to, like, deviate from the plan you had in your head, that this is kind of how things are going to go. And you become more and more rigid the more you know about the world in the back of your head, which means that when your players come up with a funny idea where it's like, let's just try and bribe this guy. Wouldn't that be funny? Maybe this guy's bribable or something. Imagine that in a context, right? Or let's try and seduce
Imagine if
this
a
guy.
giant eagle from Lord of the Rings was rideable,
Exactly,
some would say.
exactly. Or, like, what if we could seduce this prison guard to get our way out of prison? Wouldn't that be funny? And if you've spent 20 hours preparing the noble honor and social workings of the prison guards and of the guards of this town, you're never going to let that fly. But you might be getting in the way of a more humorous, low stakes sort of improvisational moment that your party might enjoy for later. So I think sometimes you shouldn't budge and you shouldn't undercut the tone and you shouldn't improvise, even if for a low stakes story. But sometimes I think this is one of the things that's keeping you from doing a low stakes story, is that you're inflexible about your world and your setting because you've spent so much time on it.
Yes. Yeah. I generally agree. I generally really agree with that. And I think that we really want to make our creations shine. And another thing that, like, it's kind of like related on the side is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the low stake stuff that we come up with is not as cool as the high stake stuff. And I'm not sure which direction the, like, causality goes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's like when you think of something, if you want to add, like, something that might threaten the world
Mm-hmm.
to your universe, you want it to be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to low stake stuff, you're more tolerant of having something that is maybe a little bit more silly, a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
goofy. Or maybe it's that when you come up with something really cool, you want to put it in a spotlight by giving it a bigger weight in your world. Either way, this is just one way of saying I still think that Machine Satan is the most compelling part of your world and the one that I'm the most interested in.
Yeah, I think that's partially, so if we're talking specifically about my setting, I think that's partially because Machine Satan embodies the core conflicts and beliefs of this world and strikes at themes that are relevant to us in the 21st century. And so it's easy for it to be compelling.
Yeah, but
Because
also, I mean, also just like aesthetically,
yeah.
you have, like, spent a lot of time coming up with a very cool, engaging, horrific picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is that small stakes stories are just as hard to write, and you don't necessarily have as much practice with them. Um, let's say the bad guy has a dorky helmet, but he's going to kill all of the known universe. You kind of can easily look past at the dorky helmet and just at the fear of the fact that the known universe is going to die. Um, but if the bully in your schoolyard drama has a dorky haircut, um, that kind of matters. Like I think when you write personal stakes, you can write a really gripping drama about a family that has owned a bakery in a town for 100 years, but is going to go out of business soon. But you have to be good at it. Like you have to know how to play up each of these individual characters' emotions, how to communicate them in a charismatic and interesting but unforced way. And you have to know the details of this baking environment, right? And for these big, huge stakes, you can take a much more macroscopic sort of perspective and lean much more on things that you're familiar with, right? You know, these orcs are from Sauron, and this bad guy is Odium from Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, and this is just like the bad guys from Warhammer 40K or something like that, right? And if we're really talking about a medieval bakery drama, maybe you don't have as much familiarity with those stories, and they can be harder to write because you have to really make them much more personal, and you got to care about the individual people more. And I think that's also part of the difficulty is you got to bring your players in, right? If it's all about your players'
Yeah.
motivations, you got to bring them much more to the forefront. And not everybody trusts their players, and honestly, not everybody should trust their players. Like there are players who are not well suited to playing that kind of character, who are much better suited to playing a silent, stoic character whose motivations we don't really get into, who's just here to save the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there are people who or I mean, just to disconnect it from the type of characters that they're playing. There's players who just like who enjoy showing up at the table and having like a big easy threat that
Yeah.
they can be pointed against, and then a series of adventures which are all different, but we always know why we're doing this. We're here to fight the big evil threat.
Yeah.
And so that ties it all together for us and makes it easier to not spend half of the session discussing the morality of our actions
Yeah.
or doing like a deep role play with Nana, who is concerned that changing the bakery into a shoe store will be betraying her family legacy, even though changing it to a shoe store will actually save it because economically that's the viable way.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it also has to do with what we're individually best at, and what we grew up with. And I think you and I are each better, or more comfortable with more macroscopic stories. I think when we played Blades in the Dark, I did a great job with certain family aspects of showing how, like, individual of our scoundrels in our party, how individual player characters' families were messed up in different ways, and how this kind of gives context to how these characters act. And I thought I was actually really good at creating those smaller stakes personal dramas where it's just about, I'm worried about this teenager and that she's getting into some bad stuff and she's getting in over her head, you know?
Yeah.
Or, boy, do I feel the grief of my father who's been an alcoholic all his life and has been dominated by an abusive spouse, right? Like,
Yeah.
but in both of those cases, I couldn't pull it off without making it really grim and sad. And really tying it directly to personal strategy and like reaching for the kids, reaching for like heavy real life issues and topics. I couldn't make it click and interesting when I didn't do that. So I think it also has to just do with like each person's own abilities. And if you're best at writing I feel like part of it is, maybe you don't need low stakes stories. If you're good at writing high stakes stories and that's what you're good at and your party enjoys it, maybe that is okay, right? For me,
Yeah.
I still want to explore it, but like I think part of the reason why sometimes we write better high stakes stories is we're more experienced at it and we've read more books like that and we're better at doing it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And on the topic, I was actually surprised when we did our Edge of Extinction episode,
Mm-hmm.
and like there was a strange focus on the way that I ran parent figures
Mm.
in the campaign.
Yeah.
Like Nereid's character, Picionas,
Mm.
and your character, Idarion's father.
Mm.
Yeah, those
And
were
Lord
somehow
von
highlights. I
Zeeland.
was not expecting. Yeah, I don't know. You guys didn't bring up Lord von Zeeland as much. I think
Mm.
that was a very weird narrative, and I think that the focus of that storyline was
Yeah.
less on like how well I roleplayed Lord von Zeeland and more like how fucked up the whole like
Yeah.
thing with like marrying nobles with human nobles with elves
Yeah.
works out with the long lifespan and all that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that was interesting because I did not expect that. I was really like I was happy to hear that, but I was not really thinking that like the parent relationships would end up standing out so much
Yeah.
beyond what you guys as players wanted to make out of it, which in your case was like a big deal. But in the case of Picciona, like she gave me very little to
Yeah.
work with. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is, especially if you want to write a lower, like if you want to write a lower stakes narrative, right? In D&D, if you want to produce a lower stakes narrative, focus on the things that lower stakes narratives have. They're shorter. Maybe don't invest as much time into preparing it. Focus on making sure that, like, try and make sure that you don't start to get inflexible and start creeping in with these larger, higher stakes things because they just feel cool somehow, right? Try to really find what is cool about the low stakes situation. What is fun about it? What evokes emotions that you want, you know? Sometimes I feel like as a DM, you get stuck in a rut trying only to evoke fear and excitement. But there are other feelings that
Hmm.
you can make your players feel, that you can try to make them
Hmm.
feel, right? And I would recommend to do that in the prep process and not stand in your own way like that.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
This point, I'm not sure if we stayed on point, but it was sure a long conversation. All right. The third one is it's a bit of a joke.
Well, just
Uh,
to summarize, I mean, this point was, right, maybe you were standing in your own way all along,
yes.
right, by investing so much time and effort into the world, right? And I mean, I guess we drifted a little bit, but I think that's true,
Yeah.
right? Like investing less effort, allowing things to be a little bit more janky because you're not used to writing this kind of story and you're going to get better. And and like if it's between a bad and low stakes story and or a worse and low stakes story and a better and high stakes story, stick to your guns, or you're just going to keep writing high stakes stories, which you can. But
Yeah.
you know, if what you want to do is write a low stakes one, then you got to do it even when it feels awkward, and you're going to figure it out by failing.
Yeah. Third point.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play another game. No, that's the title. Like no, if I want to play D&D, this cannot be like this. This is not an impossible problem,
Yeah.
and this is kind of a this is just I had this thought pretty early
Mm-hmm.
on in the process of this
Mm-hmm.
episode where I was like, what if we just played a different game? Because there are games that are more designed for this. And D&D, it is true, D&D is designed to eventually build up to large cosmic narratives. That's what the game is designed for. But I think
Yeah.
that after point one and point two, we can I want to kind of like explicitly reject this way of thinking as the only solution. Like you can
Yeah.
absolutely go out and play another game. We have done that. We are planning on doing that, and you can do that. But if you want to play D&D, I think that there are solutions that are not just like throwing your hands up and going like this is impossible
Mm. Yeah,
because
I like
we
I
have
think there's lots of
yeah
games, right, that serve to cater to a low stakes narrative, and you don't need to fight the system in order to create that kind of narrative. The whole point of the game system is to help facilitate you produce the kind of narrative that you want. You know, the idea is you choose the game that produces the kinds of narratives that you want to produce, and then you play that game and the game helps facilitate the narrative, right? So, if you're choosing D&D, D&D is designed to facilitate cosmic, heroic-ish narratives. I mean, D&D is much more unfocused in the kind of narratives it's meant to produce. But like, imagine you're playing Blades in the Dark and you're like, man, it's always so grim and stressful. It's like, it's because it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a crime show, you know? I mean, it's
Yeah,
supposed to, you're supposed to.
you look at the table, you look at the random tables, like none of these are happy results. How come?
Exactly. And it's like, well, maybe there's a different game that is for you. Now, honestly, I don't have that many to recommend, but I know, for example, there's one that's called like Miss Bernberg's School for Young Ladies or something like that. And it's like about high school dramas, right? And you're a bunch of like queer teenagers in this school, in this formative school, in this prep school or whatever. You know, and like the stakes are, will I embarrass myself? Will I fall in love with this other character, right? Will I whatever? And it's designed to generate those personal narratives. So, you know, maybe Bakery Simulator, the game, is better for your bakery story than D&D.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you really want to stretch things and design the baker playbook in Blades in the Dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's absolutely true. Other games exist, and honestly, playing them will probably make you a better D&D player and a game designer, the dungeon master, I think, because
Yeah.
you will learn about other options. You'll find mechanics, you'll find ideas that then you can integrate in your game. But like, if D&D is what you want to play and what your group wants to play, it's okay, and there are ways to do it, and we have talked about them here today. And
Like, for
I just wanted to
example,
stretch.
yeah, like, for
Capping the
example,
level.
capping the level.
Yeah, capping the level. Just designing the game with the low stakes in mind. Stuff like capping the level, designing the stakes, designing the world to be power scaled in a way that the players can go to higher levels without
Yeah.
becoming the only defenders of the material plane. And yeah, it's not an impossible problem. And I mean, even going to hell and fighting in the blood war doesn't have to mean that if you die in the blood war, then the entire material plane will be overrun by demons, right?
Yeah.
That you can have
Yeah, I
other
mean,
interests in why you're fighting in the blood war.
there's like a logarithmic scale or an exponential scale of what is high stakes, right? I mean, cosmic stakes are high, but even national stakes are high. And if you think about it, personal stakes in which you could die are also high. So there's a lot of narratives that you can do that fall short of being of like the cosmic level, but even lower than that, right? Like for me,
I mean,
my first campaign.
Age of Extinction was already, like, the scales were national, right?
Yeah.
Like, the world was never at stake.
And also, I can remember there being moments in there where I felt like the stakes were really high, for my character personally, but they weren't necessarily high globally. And I think that that's maybe another point on managing stakes that we can get into later, which is the higher the chance of failure, the more the stakes matter. um, so there's sort of another way to sort of modulate it. But yeah, so you know. There's a lot of like even the blood war I would
There's a lot
experience
of
even
buttons and
going off to
levers you
fight
can
in the
have
blood
play
war
with.
and potentially dying feels like a high stakes narrative to me, I guess, is all I'm trying to say.
I mean, it is a high stakes narrative, I think, but like, it is a high stakes narrative for you, like, personally as a player,
Yeah.
because you might die. But like,
Yeah.
that's almost that is a much more like, that's a threat that is much more like built into the game of D&D. Like,
Yeah.
the threat of death is much more of a thing you can't remove from D&D. But like, if we
Mm.
talk about the thing that we can have control over, I think that, you know, like, if you're fighting in the blood war, why are you fighting in the blood war is like a good point. Another point is like, what are the stakes if you fail? But also, do you have to fight in the blood war now, or can you postpone that? Because one point that you made that was excellent, I think, was like, can the player still pursue their own goals on the side?
Mm.
So like time bombs
Mm.
are like and deadlines are a two what's it called? A two-bladed weapon? Two-bladed sword? Like they
They're a
cut both
sword that
ways?
cuts both ways.
They're swords that cut both ways. There you go. They're swords
Yeah,
that cut both ways because they help create momentum, but at
yeah,
the same time, if the stakes are the world's going to end and there's a time bomb and there's a ticking timer,
yeah,
or even just like your town is going to be wiped out, there's a ticking timer. Every moment you're not spending doing this is like insanely irresponsible, right? But
exactly.
if you say we are at higher level, we are talking about like we're dealing with one of the princes of hell, uh, and it doesn't really matter if the thing happens in a week or in a year because they're immortal.
Yeah,
Then you can leverage the high level of the NPCs involved to be like, yeah, this archdevil wants you to do this within the next year, and it's probably going to take a week.
yeah,
And then you can, like you can be in hell and you can do other things in hell. And then when you go fight the blood war and like kill this one demon general, then you've done it. But in the meantime, you have some time to explore the setting of hell and pursuing your own goals in hell and do fun stuff on the side. And yeah,
yeah. Like
sometimes
Matt Colville
the scales of cosmic. Sorry.
Matt Colville once described this like, if you keep only having Avenger storylines, then don't be surprised when none of your characters go off to do their own thing. Like Hawkeye doesn't only goes off to do his own thing when there's nothing so pressing on the table that the entire Avengers are required, right?
I
And
mean,
so
no
if
one
you
reads Hawkeye comics, but nice try.
but
Point
basically,
taken.
yeah, basically, if you keep putting in threats of a power level that require the entire party's attention, then the entire party will always be focused, and they'll never split up to go do their own things,
Yeah,
to take on challenges on their own, or just work on side projects on their
yeah, absolutely.
own.
All right.
Okay.
I honestly I don't have much more to say on this because I think that like once we move past to these general points, so
Mm-hmm.
much depends on the nitty-gritty of your story, of your group,
Mm-hmm.
of your players, of your whatever.
Yeah.
And that's not something we can possibly cover here.
I mean, I have two more points. So the
Sure.
first is something I mentioned earlier. The amount that the stakes matter is also dependent on the actual risk of failure, or the actual perceived risk of failure. To use an example from Edge of Extinction, in the Edge of Extinction campaign, we were a team of mercenaries sent in to infiltrate an invading nation and stop them from invading our homeland. Um, and so, even though the stakes there are sort of on the national level and not on the cosmic level, the stakes still felt incredibly high for a few sessions there because it was very tough going. Like, we were close to dying every single combat that we were in. And it created a level of stress and a level of tension because even though the stakes aren't that the nature of reality will dissolve, the stakes are kind of that everybody we know and everything we worked for in the campaign was kind of futile, right? And that speaks to stakes being relative, but I also measurably felt the stakes come down when we started to have a few easier fights after that as well, right? And so if it, basically stakes are modified by the perceived risk of failure. If the game is being run in a really tough and difficult way, low stakes can feel very high. And if you do it the other way around, even theoretically high stakes can feel fairly low because you know you're going to win. There's no true risk of Gorzalak eating the world because every fight so far has been trivial level and every negotiation has gone your way. And so you feel confident, you feel strong, you feel like you've got this under control.
Yeah, it's that's true, and um, it's interesting because the time that you were having the most fun was, or at least that you said you were having the most fun, was in the section before that, when you were just like going around the city in the basically post-atomic city,
Mm-hmm.
haggling with factions and fighting wallkeepers.
Mm.
and all the wallkeeper fights were like easy for you guys.
Mm.
Like I could throw a lot of wallkeepers at you guys, and you did not have you did not have a huge difficulties handling a lot of wallkeepers, and you were basically fast. Sometimes you were just like going after them actively to like lower my control counter
Yeah.
of wallkeeper control over the city, while you were focusing on the narrative of you kind of like flipping the factions to your side. And you
Yeah.
told me that was the time where the campaign was the most fun for you. And in that
Yeah.
time, I thought that the fights are never really challenging, and that's probably was part of the point.
Yeah, I think so, right? I think players like to win more than you would think. And it's actually, as a DM, you often have this concern, I'm not really challenging them. Do they even take it seriously? And the answer is yes, they are taking it seriously, and they love the fact that they're strong. And they're like, hey, this is awesome. I'm a hero, right? And the reason they take it seriously is not because they were about to die, actually. The reason they take it seriously is because they really love, the NPC you came up with and the setting you came up with. And so part of this I would also say is if you're a new DM and you're anxious your players aren't going to engage in your world, if they're good players, they will. And don't stress about that so much. And you can ask them to. You don't have to force them
Yeah.
via narrative means to interact with the world the way you want them to. You could just talk to them and say, hey, guys, I wish we could take this a little bit more seriously. I kind of had envisioned this as a profound campaign or something like that.
Yeah, and you can trust them to have fun with your monsters, even if your you can trust them to engage with your monsters, even if your monsters aren't like wiping the floor with them every single time.
Exactly. Just look at popular video games. Most fights are not seriously challenging to the main character, and then every once in a while there's a boss fight, and it is seriously challenging to the main character. Why are many games like this? Well, because it seems to be what players like. They seem to like being able to win a few easy fights and then have to challenge their skills and then go back to sort of practice mode almost, where you're fighting enemies that don't really seriously threaten your run, but that are still exciting to fight, right?
Yeah. Now I'm thinking that I mean I don't play regularly,
Mm-hmm.
except sometimes I just grab my Switch for
Mm-hmm.
because it's very portable, so it's very easy to just like pick up my Switch and play a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
like what my go-to is Smash, where I
Mm.
just spend like 20 minutes playing against the AI at the highest difficulty against a
Yeah.
single opponent, and I was like, that does not fit what you just said, but okay. Like it's still your point still stands, but I was just like, wow, that does not describe my experience at all.
Well, that's
For
true. I
me,
mean, there's lots of. I mean, I think games that, as I described them, appeal to the common denominator. Obviously, there's exceptions, right? Like, they're one of the exciting and fun things about the Souls-like franchise, like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Elden Ring, right? Is that in those games, if you aren't paying attention, low-level enemies can wipe the floor with you, right? And that's part of the excitement. But you'd have to acknowledge that FromSoft's games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and Bloodborne are only part of the market, and the majority of the RPG video game market leans into kind of the other playstyle.
yeah, absolutely. Man, I had fun playing Dark Souls.
Yeah, I want to play Bloodborne. I'm excited.
Me too. It's one of those games that like I always want to come back to it at some
The
point.
thing that excites me about it is what I don't like about some of FromSoft's games is they have kind of what I call levelitis, where there's too many little mechanics and too many little bonuses that matter that are hard to keep track of. And I think what you're supposed to do is you're just supposed to like fly by vibes. But if you actually give me the numbers and the information, I will try and I will want to figure out the puzzle of the game and like cognitively solve it. And so I prefer games that have like that are simpler in their mechanical
Yeah.
execution, or at least hide their mechanics, so that I don't feel stupid for not trying to optimize them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
Bloodborne is
absolutely.
apparently simpler of the bunch.
Yeah, that is good.
All right,
But yeah,
my last
last point.
yes, my last point. We both write high stakes adventures all the time, even when we're trying not to. I used to make this joke that like every day I sit down, I try to make a salad, and I end up with a pie. And every step where I gradually drift from making one into making the other, I think to myself, yeah, but it's kind of better this way. But then in the end, no matter how hard I consider it, and no matter how well I justify it, I always end up with a pie instead of a salad, right? If you have a
Well,
natural inclination to write high stakes narratives, find somebody who has a natural inclination not to, and play in their game or watch their stories and see what you can learn from them. Because each of us, is sort of more leaned in one direction. So maybe we can't give you the very best advice. So I would encourage you to, because there are people who are incapable of writing high stakes stories, right? There are people who every time they sit down to write a high stakes stories end up making a personal story about the Aragorn and his pet raccoon or whatever, you know? So if you're interested in writing low stakes narratives, seek them out, consume them, seek out people who write them easily and intuitively, ask them how they do it. And you might find other helpful additional advice to get you sort of on this track.
yeah. It's funny. I recently started a low stakes campaign for actually like basically some colleagues, because we started a TTRPG club and I'm running a very like episodic campaign that is basically, it's just a Suicide Squad where every session is its own little setting, with the stakes being usually like bound to this place, and the players do not have, even personal stakes are gone. Like even the stakes are hey, you want to play some D&D, right? Here's an adventure, here's a wacky whimsical world, go have fun and try to complete this objective by engaging in the fun and whimsical world. And we talked about this already, and like I had my first near TPK in this world.
Yep.
And I think that due to the lower stakes of the adventure, like it was fine. Like the near TPK was handled in a way that like was still narratively satisfying, and it did not require a huge suspension of disbelief that the bad guys wouldn't just like kill the players immediately. They're just like, we're gonna capture them and we're gonna talk to them, because the bad guys were not monsters, even though they were kobolds. Inhuman, according to some would say.
I mean, in some settings.
Yeah. But it's funny that you pointed out to me that like even in this, for an adventure like this, I still needed to have a narrative framework that justified the low stake episodic storytelling by saying it's a Suicide Squad thing, so it's still somehow all narratively cohesive and it still has to make sense. Like there's still a part,
and,
like,
and like even the Suicide Squad,
I pulled it off. I pulled it off, but in my head, I still had to like have it all make sense.
Exactly, right? And like even the Suicide Squad sort of methodology, you would say, well, there is a motivation. The personal motivation is you don't want to be killed by the people who run the Suicide Squad. So now you have to go do this thing, right?
Yeah, sure. But like those are not real stakes, because if you showed up for the session, then you're going, and like if you like the only way for those stakes to be real is if you actually go, I don't want to do this session, I don't want to do this adventure, actually I would like to stay in prison and not obey. And then they're like, okay, then you're not getting years off your sentence.
Yeah, but what if you go and then you try to escape?
Well,
see, the stakes, there are stakes. The stakes are
but
the stakes aren't cosmic, but there are still relatively high personal stakes, which is okay. You're a recovering high stakes abuser, so baby steps, right? You're going from high